everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors. And today's contract tip has to do with what documents do you sign when a buyer and a seller negotiate terms using the counteroffer form and finally come to terms. So I believe I've covered this before, but it warrants repeating. So if you have a buyer that initiates an offer on an original offer on a purchase and sale agreement, and the buyer sends it to the seller makes a counteroffer on a counteroffer form, either the GAR counteroffer form or the RE counteroffer form. Both sets of contracts have a counteroffer form. In the RE, it's form RE 110 counteroffer, and in the GAR contracts, it is form F 249 counteroffer to or modification of the unaccepted original offer. So again, back to the example. So the buyer makes an offer on a purchase and sale agreement, and they're the pups. See them? And then the seller makes a counteroffer on a counteroffer form. And this can go back and forth any number of times. Then the buyer can make a counteroffer. Again, it would be on another counteroffer form, goes back to the seller. Seller makes another counteroffer, goes back to the buyer. Buyer makes another counteroffer, goes back to the seller. And let's say we're done. Well, so the question is, what forms get signed? Well, there's only one form that gets signed by the seller. Now the buyer is going to sign the original offer when they make the original offer. So the buyer is going to sign the original offer. The seller never signs the original offer. The seller only signs the counteroffer, the last counteroffer. There's only going to be one counteroffer that is signed, and the seller only signs the counteroffer that has all of the agreed upon terms. Now the buyer is going to sign that too. So the buyer's signature is going to be on two forms. The buyer's signature is going to be on the original offer and the final counteroffer. The seller's signature is only going to be on the final counteroffer. A seller never, ever, ever, ever goes back and signs an original offer. Why? Well, why would they? If you have an original offer signed and a counteroffer signed, you have two binding contracts with differing terms. If that were to be the case, there would be no counteroffers. The seller would have just signed the offer as it came across originally from the buyer. So why am I saying all this? Well, it's written out in the forms themselves. So let's look at the GAR counteroffer form. Again, that is F249 counteroffer to or modification of the unaccepted original. And in this form, it does say this is a counteroffer to or modification, as the case may be, of the unaccepted original offer. So right there, unaccepted means the seller's not going to sign it, or they would have, if they had accepted it, they would have signed it. Then it says previous counteroffers rejected. So what that means is there's only one counteroffer form that gets signed, only the one that everybody agrees to. So in the meantime, as we're going back and forth with the negotiations, if there is any provision that the buyer and the seller agree upon that is different from the original offer, but is agreed upon in the counteroffers, that agreed upon provision is carried through in each successive counteroffer. But then this is the important part. Relationship between original offer and this counteroffer. The original offer is hereby incorporated by reference into this counteroffer. However, the terms of this counteroffer shall modify and control over any conflicting or inconsistent provisions contained in the original offer. Effective accepting this counteroffer, when the counteroffer is signed by the buyer and the seller, and a copy of the same is delivered to both parties. So what's that? Yes, you're right. That's the binding agreement. Notice of acceptance is binding agreement. And it goes on to state, a legally binding agreement shall be formed. Okay, now again, it reiterates it just so there is no confusion. since the original offer, including all exhibits thereto, is incorporated by reference into this counteroffer, only this counteroffer needs to be signed to create a legally binding agreement between the parties. So the seller is only going to sign the counteroffer. A seller never goes back and signs the original offer because all of those are incorporated. And again, it states it twice in the counteroffer form. Now, it does go on to state that if the parties want what's called a clean copy or a conformed copy, where especially if the buyer and the seller have been going back and forth negotiating different items on several counteroffers, then if either party requests a clean copy or conformed copy, then you agree to do a conformed copy. So basically what you do, what a conformed copy is you go back and you pull out a clean purchase and sale agreement. You write it up that reflects the final terms of negotiation. Now, if you're going to do that, there is a GAR special stipulation that you should use, and that is GAR special stipulation 622, and it says conformed copy of agreement. Buyer and seller acknowledge that the above agreement is a conformed copy of an agreement between the parties dated, you fill in the blank. In the event of any conflict between the conformed agreement and the original thereof, all parties agree that the original shall control. We all know that sometimes mistakes are made, typographical errors are made. If there's a change in numbers when you're cleaning it up, the terms of the original offer. And the original offer doesn't mean the original offer that the buyer first sent over. It means the original binding contract, which went binding with the signatures on the counteroffer form. So there was a question about, well, Gidgee. There was a question about, well, if I have the seller sign the counteroffer form and sign the original offer form, we only filled in the binding agreement date on the counteroffer form. We never filled it in on the original offer. You guys, filling in the date on the form itself or not having a date on the form itself does not negate what a binding offer is. If you have both party signatures on a document, you have a binding agreement. It doesn't matter if the parties have filled in the date or filled it out incorrectly. The definition of a binding agreement and of the terms of notice make it clear that you can determine when a binding agreement is between the parties, what the date is, and when it was binding upon the parties, even if that information isn't specifically filled out on the contract. The binding agreement is notice of acceptance, when all parties have notice of acceptance. So again, that is all clearly defined in the purchase and sale agreement. So if you have an original offer that has buyer and seller signatures on it and a counter offer that has buyer and seller signatures on it, you, in essence, even if a binding agreement date is not filled in on either form, you have two binding contracts between the parties that have differing forms. We don't want to leave it up to a judge to decide which is the true contract. So don't ever have a seller go back and sign the original offer. And this is also spelled out in the RE forms counteroffer form. And again, that is RE form 110. And it does specifically state the original offer executed by the party making said offer as amended only by this final counteroffer executed by all parties shall constitute the full and entire agreement. Other counteroffers are not part of this contract. So again, fully executed means a form that has both buyer and seller signatures on it. So I hope this contract tip helped you out. If either of the parties or a lender or closing attorney wants all parties' signatures, then what I suggest you do is go and do a conformed copy, cleaning it all up for those parties or even for the buyer or the seller. Thank you guys so much. Hope this contract tip helps you out. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service innovation, and education.